morning. Today is Tuesday, April the 15th of 2025, and it is Tuesday of Holy Week. And we are here for day 2 of our Holy Week videos. So if you haven't already viewed our Holy Week video from yesterday, which was Monday of Holy Week, make sure you go back and watch that one. Hopefully by now you've already obtained your Holy Week reading guide, whether that's a physical copy or whether you are accessing the digital copy at www.firstbaptistgaston.org on the Holy Week tab. Obviously, today's reading is the longest of our Holy Week reading, and I'll remind you the Holy Week reading guide can be found on the very back of your devotional guide. We've got that conveniently there for you on the back. And so today, this morning, you should have read Mark chapter 11 from verse 20 all the way to Mark chapter 13, verse 37. That is a lot of reading, and that is the most reading that I'm going to give you this week during Holy Week. But I want to speak to you a little bit. We know in Mark chapter 11, verse 27, it seems to have been Tuesday of Holy Week, and Jesus is going to continue on Tuesday of Holy Week to have conversations with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he's going to try to teach them in parables. Obviously, they're not going to be receptive to the message, but I find it interesting that when Jesus is confronted with some of the most judgmental groups of people, Jesus gives them a practical yet a profound command. And I think it's something that you and I can apply today on Tuesday of Holy Week. If you have a copy of God's Word, go ahead and grab that and turn to Mark chapter 12, verses 30 through 31. And in these verses are going to answer the scribes' question, right? The scribes are going to come to Jesus on Tuesday of Holy Week, and here's what they're going to ask. They're going to ask Jesus, which commandment is the most important of all? Now, remember, the Pharisees and scribes are not asking a question to get an answer so that their minds can be enlightened and so that their faith can be strengthened. No, they're trying to ask Jesus a question so they can trap him and put him in a corner. They're not kind in their understanding of asking Jesus this question. And so here's what Jesus says in Mark chapter 12, verses 30 through 31. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And Jesus goes on to say, the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And in my absence during my sabbatical, Pastor Steve did a great job in exegeting this passage and looking at it, but I want to remind you of it today. Jesus is backed in a corner on Tuesday of Holy Week. The scribes pressure him, say, what's the greatest commandment of all? And he gives two really practical yet profound things. The first is love God with all your heart. The second is love your neighbor as yourself. And for many of you who are watching today, you have heard this your entire life. You know this, you've read this, you've studied this, you might have even done precept studies on this, but how do you actually apply this in your daily life? At this time, we know that Jesus was just days from the cross here on Tuesday of Holy Week. He could have tried to use his breath in answering this question to convince the religious elite to spare his life, but he doesn't do that. He could have destroyed them in an argument with just one word. He doesn't do that. There's nothing that Jesus couldn't have done in this situation. Instead, he uses his time, he uses his breath, and instructs them. In verse 30, love the Lord your God with all your heart. Verse 31, love your neighbor as yourself. And so Satan and his demons are going to try all throughout the day, especially since you've started today, you're doing good. You've started today in his word. You've read the reading guide, right? The assigned reading. You've done your devotional, and you might have even watched this video. But he's going to try to convince you to not spend time with the Father. What I mean by that is spend time as you go throughout your day. Not just that time you start in the morning and spend time with him, but I mean talking with him all the day long. He's going to try to convince you to not do that. And I encourage you to not let him win in that. And you can defeat Satan today, but only through Christ. On Tuesday of Holy Week, I want to remind you, love God, love people. Have a great Tuesday. We will see you tomorrow morning for Wednesday of Holy Week.